Hey, Barefoot parents. I'm so glad you are back joining me today. I am again recording from a different spot. I am trying out all of the things because we are in this tiny cabin, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And so when the kids are actually sleeping, I'm trying to find little pockets of time to continue working on trying to build this business. And it has been so hard. I messaged my business coach. We use Voxer, and so I'm speaking to her. I'm not on a phone call with her, though. And I'm like, I just basically give up. I give up because every time I try to work on my business, I am reduced to tears because it's just that real. Life is very real right now. And so working on this has been very hard. So thank y'all for sticking with me. I'm finding the grace and the time to do the things that God has inspired me to do. I remember him asking me sometime back, a few months back, he asked me this: will you build this course even if nobody pays it any attention during your lifetime? If nobody buys your course, if nobody wants it even during your lifetime, will you still build it? And he brought to me the painter. I believe it's Leonardo da Vinci. Who is it? The famous painter that sold no paintings during his lifetime. But now he is like super famous and his paintings sell for millions of dollars. And that's the perspective that God basically brought me into a few months back. Will you still build this course even if nobody buys it in your lifetime? Because it's not for my glory, right? It's a humbling experience to be like, okay, I'll build this even if. Like, that is a super walk of faith, big time step of faith, to be like, okay, I'm building this for nothing. At least I feel like it's for nothing. So I encourage you with that today. And we're going to talk about the woman with the issue of blood. But I'm going to point out some different verses and read it from the Message translation today. And because we are going to talk about this, I'm going to point out my inner healing course. Not my Made Whole course. That's the overall inner healing. If you need overall, go back to in the womb, inner healing, soul wound healing, and you want that, then go look up my Made Whole course. But if you need birth trauma healing, if you need to heal from birth trauma, I have written a course called Take Back Your Birth, Healing, a guide to healing birth trauma. And it's brand new. I only have a few people that are currently walking through it, and they're going at their own pace, so they're not very far into it. But I know it was very much inspired by the Lord, and I just want to invite you to come along with me in that journey. And right now, if you do want to take me up on that offer, it's $97 for the course. But right now, if you jump in and want to take back your birth and heal that birth trauma, I'm going to offer you 2 free coaching calls, one-on-one calls during that time that you are walking through that course. So those are my gift to you if you jump in on that offer right now. So let me know if you want to do that. I will make sure to put the link down in the show notes so that you can find it. And then my calendar link so that you can get set up and we can start, we can book that phone call and get you in on that and get you started with your healing. So with that, I will see you in the podcast. Welcome to the Barefoot Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Hutton. I help Christian moms have a home birth they desire through education and the Word. If you're an old soul that is passionate about restoring godly wisdom and disconnecting from this interconnected world, then you're in the right place. Let's discuss godly restoration through the 5 H's of home: home birth, homeschool, homemaking, homemade, home remedies, and health. Okay, so I read this verse twice recently because it's in Matthew and it's in Mark. I believe it's also in Luke. And the woman with the issue of blood. So that's how we think of it, right? I think the Message titles that chapter The Hemorrhaging Woman. But basically, if you've been a Christian for any time, then you know this story because it's her act of faith. And if you've heard anyone talk about this story, it's that this woman, she came out of that place of isolation and seclusion. She had to stay, away from the marketplace. She had to stay away from everybody because Jewish law said so, that she was, quote, unclean. which I have an interesting twist on that word unclean recently because I have had the same issues, this issue with blood and, just female hormones and trying to heal from all of the things. And if you've listened to any of my nutrition podcasts or any of my health episodes, go back and listen to them. I share more of my story, but after Harper was born, the fourth baby, I had very irregular cycles. My cycle came back I bled for 6 weeks, and then 8 weeks postpartum, I got my period back, which was totally abnormal. If I'm nursing a baby, I don't get my period back for 9 or 10 months whenever they start slowing down on their nursing. And then, just erratic, mood swings and behaviors and just crazy things going on that I had never experienced before. And it was awful. It was an awful time. And so just as soon as I started to heal, I didn't really know my ovulation. I didn't know how to track it because it was so irregular. And so we wound up pregnant, which, we weren't being all that safe anyways. And I really did want to have another baby. So I was not upset with that at all. And we have beautiful baby Blaine. And well, lo and behold, go figure. Even though I have very well nourished my body, and I shared on my Facebook a couple of weeks ago, I met with my nutritionist again, and I have actually, my thyroid it went from, now I do mineral testing, so I do hair testing. So this is quite a bit different than if you do a blood test, which I have also done a thyroid blood test. But on my mineral testing, my thyroid went from a 30 in the 30s up to 127. So this is an indication, even the 30s was considered hypothyroidism. So I was subclinical. And then I went from a 30 to 137. So this was from January of last year to August, my thyroid got that much worse. But then from August to February, when I got tested again just a couple of months ago or last month, my thyroid went from 137 all the way down to 7. So it's still a little bit high, but it went down to a 7. And so I was encouraged with that. And then 8 weeks later, I was bleeding. And then 2 weeks later, I was bleeding very heavily. And so even though my body is healing, my body is still saying something is off. And so I'm trying to figure that out. So I'm just giving you that story to say I can somewhat, what I was getting at was the unclean part. The unclean part. The reason that our bodies get this way is because we're not resting. So when you are reading the Bible and you see it's in the Old Testament when God says you're unclean for this many days, so you separate yourself, there is a very big hormonal reason for women, especially. It's our winter season when we're bleeding. Our hormones are at our lowest, and we don't feel like having a bunch of people over to our house. That's not the time to be hosting an event, or it's not the time to be out doing all the things with all of our friends, because naturally, if you will really pay attention to your body, it's a time for rest. It's a time that you don't naturally want to be talking and just having all of those girlfriends over to your house or hosting events and doing all the social things. That's what I'm looking for. What in the world? Can't even think of the word social today. But we go through 4 seasons just like we have 4 seasons in a calendar year, and just like the moon is on a 28-day cycle, women are a reflection of that, or, we're a reflection of creation. And so, all things work together. And so when you read the Bible and you see that word unclean, think of it as rest. So for this long, she had been, quote, unclean. And for this long, she had needed to rest her body because it was not healing. So a woman, this is Mark 5:25 through 34, and I'm reading it in the Message translation. So I'm going to point out a couple of different things right through here. It says, a woman who had suffered a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years, a long succession of physicians had treated her and treated her badly, taking all her money and leaving her worse off than before. She had heard about Jesus. So I want to stop right there. A woman who had been suffering a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years. This part right here. A long succession of physicians had treated her. But they didn't just treat her. They actually treated her badly, took took everything from her, took all of her money, and they left her worse off than before. So they saw this woman, and all that they saw was, I can get her money from her. Does that not sound like the world that we're living in today? Women who are struggling with hormones, women who are struggling with these female problems, they go to their OB, they go to their doctor, they're thrown a pill, they're thrown something that will mask their symptoms, they're gaslit when they go to their doctor because they're told, you're fine, when clearly nothing is fine. Everything is out of whack, something is wrong, and they take your money, and then because you're told by them that everything's okay, and they don't tell you how to get to the root of your problem, you begin on this hamster wheel cycle over and over and over again. You might look to that doctor, get a second opinion from the doctor that's trained the same way that the other doctor was that you went to. Until then, you find what a lot of people are looking for now is this holistic doctor. And then you find out that this holistic doctor, although they might help you a little bit more and it might sound better, what you find is that actually this holistic doctor just simply used herbs and remedies and, things that things that are found from nature, which is better and better for your body, although they can still be synthetic. Zinc and vitamin D are going to be your top synthetic vitamins that are like the number one thing that doctors will tell you to take. Don't take zinc and vitamin D unless you're getting it from oyster pills or cod liver oil or the sunshine. And so you go out and you start buying all of these supplements without ever knowing what test to take that actually tells you exactly what supplements you need. And so then you're again on this hamster wheel cycle, not sure, or they're telling you to take shots. A lot of holistic doctors have these allergy shots, which I'm totally confused about. So basically what a holistic doctor ends up doing a lot of times is they use the vitamins and minerals the same way that a doctor would use a pharmaceutical and a prescription. And they're still just kind of guessing, doing guesswork because they don't really know the right tests to run. And then they're taught about these shots that they want to give you. And they don't actually ever dive into, this food is actually what's going to heal you. It may take a little bit longer for you to become symptom-free, but that other medicine over there was actually still suppressing your symptoms. And so if you ever come off of that, you're going to experience all the same things again. And so I asked myself this question the other day, if we are turning to pharmaceuticals before we ever turn to food, are we actually in sin? Because the Bible says that God gave us food to heal our bodies. He gave us bread, He gave us food, He gave us the herbs of the field to actually heal our bodies. Isn't that interesting? I hope that triggers a thought for you. Because for me, I have always been someone, as a child, I would question modern medicine, question it constantly. And I would say to myself, but what would they do for this condition before modern medicine got here? I would always ask myself that question, and it would bring up anger inside of me. I would get very, very angry at the fact that we just treated medicine as if it's always existed, as if it was always there, when clearly there was a different remedy before modern medicine became a thing. Before pharmaceuticals, which if you didn't know, pharma comes from the word pharmakeia, which means witchcraft. And if you want to know what true witchcraft is, it's a brew of something. It's a concoction. It's a mixture of something to make it, to alter the state of what your body is in. And that's exactly what pharmaceuticals are. It alters your state of mind. Even birth control. You don't think of it as altering your state of mind, but it plays with your hormones, which plays with your brain, because hormones are a signal that tells your brain what to do. They're just signals. That's all hormones are. And so something as simple as what we think of as simple as birth control is actually it's a concoction, a brewery. Think of a witch's brew, right? If they are casting a spell, you've seen it in the movies, you've watched Hocus Pocus, they put in all these different things to create this spell. I'm telling you, that's exactly what pharmaceuticals are. Moving on. So here's where her faith comes in. And it says, she slipped in from behind and touched his robe. She was thinking to herself, if I can put a finger on his robe, I can get well. And the moment she did it, the flow of blood dried up. She could feel the change and knew her plague was over and done with. At the same moment, Jesus felt energy discharging from him. He turned around to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe? Who touched my robe?" So this lady experienced a miracle. She experienced a miracle. A miracle is something that happens instantaneously right there on the spot. You know without a doubt it was a miracle and it was from God. Healing, on the other hand, is something that happens over time. I experienced healing in my body when Jesus, the Holy Spirit, led by God, called me to start this podcast. And then it was only through the podcast last year that I actually found a nutritionist that I ended up working with and did mineral testing. And when she said we were going to do mineral testing, the Lord spoke to me and said, "You are made from the dust." And so I went with mineral testing, knowing that that was exactly right for me, because minerals are what we're made from. It's the foundation of everything that God created. When he took the dust from the ground is minerals, and that's the foundation of our whole entire makeup. And what I came to find out is that if you are lacking in minerals, or if you have a mineral imbalance anywhere in your body, it's going to cause other organs in your body to not function properly. So the reason that we have insulin resistance is because our minerals are out of balance, because we've not been eating properly. If you have hormonal imbalances, the organs that produce those hormones are out of balance because we don't have the minerals for them to have the energy to produce what they need to. We don't have the cells operating in our body because we don't have the proper minerals getting into the cells to create the energy that our body needs to produce everything that it needs to produce. And so the disciples said, "What are you talking about? With this crowd pushing and jostling you, you're asking who touched me? Dozens have touched you." But he went on asking, looking around to see who had done it. Now I want to stop right here, because right before this, you have to understand what's going on. Jesus has been approached by, was it the soldier? That says, "My daughter has died. Please come and raise her back to life." So he is pushing through the crowd. He is moving towards actually going to raise someone from the dead. But he stops. He doesn't get anxious. He doesn't say to her, "I don't have time for you." He doesn't prioritize the dead person over the woman who had been bleeding. He stops. He makes time for her. And then he says, he listens to her. It says, the woman, knowing what had happened, knowing she was the one, stepped up in fear and trembling, knelt before him and gave him the whole story. Gave him the whole story. If we just read this and we skip over that, we just think that Jesus was walking through the crowd. She touched him. He stopped and asked who it was, and then he went on his way. No, he stopped and he listened to her whole story. All while everyone else in the crowd was probably anxious, especially the man whose daughter had died. And I'll have to go back and read that. I hope it's the daughter and the soldier, the before story. But the fact is that someone has approached Jesus and said, "Please come heal my dead son or daughter. Raise them back to life." And Jesus says, "I'm coming." And then he stops. Imagine that father's anxiety. Or maybe he's humbled in that moment. How would you have been if you were the father or the mother in that situation, knowing that Jesus says, "I'm coming to raise your daughter back to life"? But then he stops and he listens to her whole story. And then he says to her, "Daughter, you took a risk of faith, and now you are healed and whole. Live well, live blessed, be healed of your plague." And the other thing I want to point out that I thought about that, she told her whole story. She was not ashamed of the fact that she's a bleeding woman. She no longer had that shame around the fact that we do this. This is a part of it. How do we raise our daughters up to recognize that this isn't something you have to hide, but it is something that you can also give yourself grace during that time, stay home during that time. Think about all these young girls that are going to school When God said, you need to take time to rest, but we're forcing them into a school where they have to socialize, where they have to raise their hand or they'll get in trouble to answer that question, where they have to go out and they still have to compete in PE, athletics, and their body is most vulnerable to stress and needs that rest, and their body is crying out to them, let's rest during this time. But we're forcing them to get out and do all these things because we've gotten so far away from this generational wisdom that says, listen to your body, go back to what God said in the Bible. We suddenly just think that our bodies have changed because Jesus has redeemed us from the curse. No, God created us in the beginning and he said it was good. Now, I would like to believe that Eve didn't bleed before the curse. I would like to believe that. And I would like to believe that we're not going to have a period when Jesus returns and redeems the whole world. But we do right now. And so what are we going to do about it? How are we going to heal the next generation and not allow our children and our daughters to end up in their 30s having extreme thyroid issues, extreme bleeding issues, extreme PCOS, infertility? How are we going to protect our daughters from that? Through the food that God gave us. By stepping out in faith and saying, God, what step do I take to make sure we keep our bodies whole and healthy and treat them like the temple that you said they were? So, Mama, I pray for you today. I pray for our daughters that they don't have to walk through this, that they don't have to experience the things that we're experiencing just because our food system has gotten so poor and so bad. That doctors are lying to us and cheating us. And I don't think the doctors are deliberately doing it. This is what they've been taught. It's the system set up in order that I'm mad at. And it's a holy and righteous anger because God gave us the food. And our food is being destroyed. And because our food is being destroyed, our health is being destroyed. And we are on this hamster wheel until we decide, I'm going to get out of that. And I am not going to stay in this place. I'm going to get away from it. I'm not going to live like the world says to live any longer. And Mama, I bless you with that. And I pray that God sets you on the path that you're supposed to be on. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Barefoot Parenting. If what you're doing works for you, is healthy for your family, and is growing you in the ways you need to grow, then it's time to step out of the feeling of guilt and shame and wear your Barefoot Mama badge proudly. Remember, barefoot parents are doing things differently, so be encouraged today. If you're feeling the pushback in your parenting style, you're doing something right.